hear her story tonight. I'm honored to introduce Samantha.
Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Ariana, for asking me to speak. This is my first time speaking, so I'm excited. My sobriety date is December 26th, 2019, and my home group is here, Primary Purpose in Southern Pines. We meet on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock. I have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor. I think that's all the things I'm supposed to say. So as far as my story, I'll start at the very beginning. So my parents were both alcoholics. And after they had two girls, my dad was, he said he was done having kids. And my mom wanted another kid. And so they made a negotiation. So because they had me, my dad was able to get a motorcycle, and he could go to Daytona Bike Week every year. So I was the negotiated child. And then as soon as, right after I was born, my mom got pregnant with my younger brother, which was a major surprise for them. So the reason I say that dynamic is I was kind of the forgotten child because I was the third of four, and my brother was, very little and the only boy. So, there's even a lot of family videos where you can see the other three siblings playing, and then they're like, oh, wait, where's Samantha? And it was like kind of a running joke that I would get lost in the mix. I even remember when I was in college, my dad called me one time. He said, Sam, yeah, how's NC State? And I was like, I don't go to NC State, Dad. That's not the college I go to. It's like I go to Chapel Hill. He was like, oh, how's Chapel Hill? And it really was just kind of hilarious. Even in the family newsletters, they used to talk about all of the achievements of each child. Like, oh, Risa is like top of her class, and Natalie is like a child prodigy of piano, and Samantha ties up the phone lines a lot, and Graham, he's like this amazing athlete, and he's like, excels in all the ways. So it really was, it was apparent to me. But at the same time, I saw an opportunity in that. If I'm the child that doesn't get a lot of the attention, is kind of the forgotten one, then I can get away with a lot of things. And so I decided to use it to my benefit because I didn't get caught. When you have two parents that drink excessively, they don't even remember when you get in trouble sometimes anyway. So I was like, I might as well just use that to my advantage. And so I didn't get caught often, but when I was, or really ever, I got away with so much. But when I was in third grade, I got caught stealing from Walmart because I was actually on a play date with a friend, and that dad did pay attention to what the children did. So he noticed a toy that shouldn't have been there. So, I got in trouble for that. And then fifth grade, I got caught sneaking out because I took my brother with me that time, and always got caught when my brother went with me. But most of the time I got away with stuff. And it was just like a way to, I don't know, I just liked misbehaving. And the reason, I started smoking cigarettes in fifth grade. I would steal those from my mom, because I just liked sneaking around and getting away with stuff. And then the first time I drank was seventh grade. Me and my friends went in my parents' liquor cabinet, which was extensive, I might add. And they would never notice if something went missing. And we went to the back and took, some brandy out of the back of the liquor cabinet. I think we were thinking about Titanic, like brandy and cigars, so we decided to try the brandy. And chased it with milk, like a child. And I remember thinking the next morning, oh, I'm not hungover because milk, it's like the secret remedy. My parents must not know about that. But back to my parents, growing up, I didn't know they were alcoholics. I honestly didn't figure that out until my mom was going off to detox. I thought that was what normal adults did. I didn't have another example. All of my friends' parents drank like that because I was friends with the people whose kids, whose parents partied with my parents. So they all drank a lot. And it looked fun. I couldn't wait till I was not a child anymore and I could party like my parents did. It was like, it was the only time they seemed happy was when they were partying. they seemed very miserable otherwise. So it looked like something, fun to do when I got older. But, I wasn't the type where the first time I drank, I was like, oh, all of my problems are solved. It just was kind of added to the repertoire of all the other misbehaving I did, throughout high school, like, stealing, trespassing, vandalizing, smoking, drinking. It was just like another thing I did. But meanwhile, I still did well in school. My parents, that's one thing, they were really serious about us, making something of ourselves, going to college, all that. So I did well in school, and I volunteered, and I always had, as soon as I turned 16, I always worked a lot. So I was definitely busy, so I couldn't get in that much trouble. But, eventually I go off, well, when I was 17, my mom went off to detox, and that was when she started going to AA. That was my first introduction to AA, and I would go to meetings with my mom, and I remember having this sense of that I belonged there, or like I was going to wind up in the rooms one day, and it was a scary thought, because if I'm in these rooms, that means I can't drink anymore, So I remember thinking, like, I don't know why I had this sense that they were my people too, and I was afraid of that idea, but very happy for my mom, because, she had gotten to the point where she was, blackout drinking, drinking the moment she woke up and all that kind of stuff. So there was some child trauma there, just like, trying to, I don't know, I had to kind of be the adult with my siblings. We all had to find a way to be the adult because we didn't have either. Neither was like functional as a parent, So, but anyway, I go off to college and drink a lot, but, like all my other friends did, At that point, I didn't comparatively notice a difference. We were all partying a lot, but I still worked multiple jobs, got good grades, I was able to get my stuff done. It was like, kind of like a work hard, play hard kind of deal to me. It was like, do all the things that need to get done, and then you can party. But I will say, as college went on, I started to notice what I didn't have a term for it then, but the obsession, I started to notice that, like, I really looked forward to that first drink, as soon as I got my stuff done. I would have, college buddies, it would be 11 o'clock, and they'd be like, okay, I'm headed to bed, and I'd be like, oh, I was thinking about seeing who's at the bar, So I seemed to want to drink more often as time went on, and, but, like I said, I wasn't too concerned because I was still getting the stuff done that I needed to get done, in my opinion. But then I started to notice, just keeping an eye on my time too, yeah. I started to notice when I was probably about 22, 23, I started to worry that my drinking was starting to look different than my friends, because I was hyper vigilant about it. Having two alcoholic parents, I was sure that could never happen to me, that I wouldn't become like them. So I really had a close eye on it. I'd call my sisters and be like, do you think I'm like mom and dad? And, they always would be like, no, you're not like mom and dad. It's ridiculous, because they had really gone far down that road. But it was on my mind. It was a fear of mine. And yeah, so it had gotten to the point where, if there was beer in the fridge and it belonged to me, as soon as I was done with my stuff, I was going to drink it. But I noticed I had roommates. They could just keep beer in the fridge, It could just stay there cold until, like, there was some event where they would bring them. And I was noticing those differences, and it was concerning. I even started, in college, I started going to a counselor one morning. I showed up to a class hungover, and it was actually in graduate school at this point. I showed up to a class really hungover, and the topic of the class was basically like, if you get a DUI, you will lose your license in this career. Like, one DUI, your career's gone. And I was like sitting there so hungover, like, oh. I just felt like she was talking to me, because I probably was clearly hungover. And so I got all freaked out, and I went to the guidance counselor. And that's the first time I talked to a therapist about, like, my drinking, and I just really didn't want to be like my parents. So finally, I'm starting to delve into more like mind-altering substances in addition to drinking, it's getting a little bit more wild. At this point, I'm in graduate school, so I feel like if I was going to mess up my life, I probably would have already done it. Like, I'm almost to the finish line, and I'll be an adult, you know, and then I'll have to be responsible, and like things will change, you know. So I started to get a little bit wilder, and I met this guy. He was actually from Moore County, and he was the first one to ask me if I thought I might have a drinking problem. Nobody had ever asked, and I had asked my friends, you know, everybody, am I normal? Like, you know, I'm talking to a therapist, you know, I'm trying just desperately not to be, you know, like my parents. And as soon as he asked me, he said, you know, have you ever thought you might have a drinking problem? I just started crying because I told myself that if anyone ever indicated to me that I had a problem, that I would stop, because you don't go around telling normal drinkers, hey, you think you might have an issue? Like, nobody does that. So I started crying, and I stopped. And I stopped smoking, you know, I stopped all of it, which is a good thing, because about 6 weeks later, I find out that I'm pregnant. And so that was a miracle, because if that hadn't happened, I had no idea. It was actually an unlikely thing to occur. So I was, you know, I would have continued to drink and do whatever I was doing. So that was such a blessing that, you know, unbeknownst to me, I was like protecting my child. But then, you know, that was quite the whirlwind, because not a planned child with somebody I didn't know very well. But I decided to, you know, I had always wanted to be a mom, and I didn't really want to have a child with this person particularly, but this person was on board and wanted to be a dad. So I was like, okay. So I left it's a true story. So I left my college town. You know, I'd graduated from school. I'm like this big in my first job interview in Moore County, like, hey, you want to hire me? And, you know, so I moved to Carthage, you know, have no friends. You know, I'm a new mom. I'm in a new career with a person that I don't really care for all that much, you know, to be honest. And, but those years, I consider the 3 years, I think it was maybe three to 4 years that I lived with him, to be kind of a remission in my drinking phase, because he already told me, you know, that he thought I may have a problem. And he also, you know, that's a whole other story, but he was also very, you know, controlling. And if I came home with a bottle of wine, like one bottle, he would just, the whole rest of the evening I'd be hearing about it. So I didn't drink that much in those years, because it just wasn't worth the trouble. But I definitely looked forward to it when I was able to get away from that. Like, if I could go up to Raleigh and hang out with my sisters, it was such a relief. And, you know, I would drink a ton, and, you know, but it kind of, I don't think my alcoholism like progressed in those years, because I really wasn't able to. And I was so overwhelmed with parenthood and starting a career, and it was all, you know, I honestly don't remember that much of those years. I think it was all, you know, it was kind of a blur of like, it was a nightmare, really. But, I mean, parenthood's amazing, you know, all that. It was not an easy time in my life. I was very isolated and all that. So finally, long story short, I end up getting the strength and resolve to leave that relationship. You know that it's probably a good thing to leave when the couples counselor, you know, when he doesn't show up, the couples counselor's like, what are you doing in this relationship? And I was like, yeah, I know. Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree. But so I ended up, you know, we co-parent now and everything. But as soon as I just so happily like left that relationship and got my own place, you know, in downtown Southern Pines, I just felt like I had just gotten out of jail. I mean, I really did. I felt like I just like flew the coop. I'm free. I even like bought a pack of cigarettes. I hadn't smoked in years. But I was just like, peace, you know. So I get my own place, and, you know, and all of a sudden, not only I'm just like significantly less busy than I had ever been in my life. You know, I'd always had like 2 jobs, and I volunteer, and I'm in, you know, college and this and that. I had always had, or even sports in school. Like I always had so much going on, and all of a sudden, all I have to do is work 9 to 5, and half the time my child's with his father. I mean, I just hadn't had that kind of free time before. And I lived walking distance to 5 bars, you know. And I didn't really have a chance to develop that many hobbies aside from drinking. You know, I just really went straight from college to Parenthood prison to, to downtown Southern Pines. And so I just start going out when I don't have Miles. I mean, it kind of got to the point where I was really uncomfortable. I mean, anytime he went with his dad, I knew he was safe, but that feeling of like your child that you've been with all those years now, you don't see him half the time. There was like this emptiness feeling, and I would just look around my apartment and feel like the four walls were like closing in. I just couldn't be in my own thoughts. I couldn't sit there by myself and idly. And I just walk out the door. I mean, a lot of times I'd get home from work and just kind of change out of my scrubs and put on my stuff and just walk to the bar and not even like worry about dinner. Just like, what's going on today, And I made friends, I dated this guy that was, he was an alcoholic. He blacked out every time he drank. He made me look tame. He made my drinking look very tame, which was good for me, I was like, oh, I'm fine, because, look at him, But, it was fun, but it was kind of, chaotic, to say the least. And then that didn't work out, which is good. And then I started dating this other guy, and he was a normal drinker. So next to him, my drinking looked bad, It looked, and I was aware of it. I'd mentioned before, I was hyper aware of how my drinking was perceived by others, really, as a lot of it. Now that I'm saying it out loud, that's really what a lot of it was. I was concerned of other people thinking I had a problem. And compared to his, I started to wonder again, like I did in college, if I might have an issue. So I started going to my counselor, the same couples counselor I had. I started talking to her about alcohol. It was actually convenient too, because she taught a drug and alcohol class. She was one of the mental health professionals you'd go to if you had a DUI. So she had training in that field. So we started talking, and I was very honest with her. I'll say that I didn't lie about how much I was drinking. I mean, I was there because I needed her help, so I really did tell her. But the thing is, the culture of the bars I was going to, nobody had one or two. The people I was hanging with, people just another round, just kind of. So she would give me advice well, just have no more than 2 a day, no more on 3 on any given occasion. And I'd be like, okay, And then I'd go out and, next time I go see her, she's like, how'd it go? And I'm like, it didn't really, it did not go well at all. None of your suggestions, I didn't do any of them. And and then at the same time, I did like this boyfriend I was with. I felt like he kept me stable. He was a stabilizing force in my life. And I worried that if he perceived me as a mess, someone that drank too much, that he'd break up with me, and there were just all these fears. And so I decided the whole year of 2019, I just kept taking breaks. It was the year of seeing if I could manage my drinking, seeing if I could control, seeing if I could go back to, because there was a time where I could have 1 or 2. It wasn't a first time I drank, I was out of control. So, even the years when I was a young mom, or when my child was young, I could have 1 or 2. So at some point it switched and I couldn't. And so I was trying to get back to being able to, just moderate. And, it didn't really work so well any of the times. But there were times where I made it 2 weeks and then said, had a case of the Effets, And then there's times when I would go most of a whole month. But every time when I started drinking again, it was the same, And I'm watching this happen, before my eyes, just with fear, just if this doesn't work, if I can't manage, I'm just going to have to stop completely. And I could just not picture that, because it had been part of my persona, just I liked everything about partying, you know what I mean? Just being social, being around people, music, dancing, I just had all these things in my mind of what I'd be giving up. And so there was so much fear. And I really didn't want to be like my parents. So then finally, closer to the end of 2019, things really had gotten to the point. I have 2 stories that led to me deciding I really can't drink at all anymore. So one of them, I think it was September, because I remember I had little cute names for my sober months. It was like Sober September, Dry January, whatever, But Sober September, I think it was like September 8th or 10th, It had not gone that far into September. And I was with my boyfriend and our friends at Taco Tuesday, and everyone at Taco Tuesday would have a beer or two. And I'm sitting there in amazement, just wondering how they all don't want to go drink more after that. And I was like, you know what? I am going to have one beer, and that's it. And you can't have any more after that. Even if you're uncomfortable, of course you can just have one beer, and this is the time you're proving to yourself, you can do it. And so I was like, ordered a beer. And I had that one, and then as we were leaving, I think to myself, I just need one more, and I don't want to embarrass myself and ask him to stop and get beers on the way to his house. So I tell him to just drop me off at my place. I'll be over later. I'm just going to have one beer, or I didn't tell him that, but I'm thinking that in my head. And so he drops me off at my house, and I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to go down to the bar. It's like a stone's throw from my place. I'm going to have one beer, and then I'll still be fine to drive because that's just 2 beers. And then I'll be good. I can do that. So I go to the bar, and I have a beer, and as soon as I have that beer, and I'm like ready to put it down and march out of there like I did it, my alcoholic ex walks down the stairs, and he immediately runs in and comes out, and he had bought me a drink. And I was like, well, he bought that I didn't buy it, So anyway, I ended up drinking 7 or 6, I just continued. It didn't stop. And then, fast forward hours later, my phone's blowing up with texts, my boyfriend's all concerned, where are you? I'm like, I'm just have things on my mind, I'm just saying BS things, because I'm definitely not going to say I'm out binge drinking, no big deal. And so basically, so I'm just oh, drama, I don't know. And then fast forward later, 10 in the morning the next morning, I wake up, I've missed work, I text and lie about why I wasn't at work. My ex is on the couch. There's beer bottles all over the front porch. There's cigarettes all over the front porch. There's my records all over. And granted, I didn't black out. I do remember all that. But that's what happens, That's what happens when you have one beer. That was your try. You tried. That was your best effort. It's a total mess. And I was thinking about, what am I going to tell work? What am I going to tell my boyfriend? And I'm just, going through my life, wondering what I'm going to get away with. And, it's as a kid, I got away with everything. I think the only time I ever got in trouble with the cops when I was growing up was me and my friends were lighting things on fire off of a water tower. And just letting things on fire fall off the water tower. Obviously we got in trouble. But the cops just called our parents, we're pretty privileged, I'm sure. But anyway, I just felt all of a sudden, things were catching up with me. I wasn't getting away with anything, and worst of all, even if nobody found out, I still don't know if anybody found out that my ex crashed on my couch, There's things I'll never know if people were talking about or not. But at the same time, I knew. And over time, just all those little things, just all the chaos, I knew about it. And I was just hating myself more and more. I wasn't one of those people, I guess, I don't know if anybody is one of these people, but I really did care about the bad things I was doing. Some people are when I was taking drugs and I didn't care who I hurt. Every single thing I did that hurt someone or lied to someone, I did take all of it to heart, and it just made me despise myself. And when you despise yourself, you don't care if you're taking care of yourself or not. You're going to keep pouring alcohol, I hate myself. It almost becomes a self-harm thing where you're well, I don't deserve to be, take care of myself, So it had gotten so bad. I felt like there was this a metaphor. I felt like there was a monster in an inch in front of my face, and it was hey, remember me? Yeah, I had control of both of your parents growing up. I'm here now. You recognize me, right? I couldn't deny it. I was looking like straight in the face of what exactly happened to my parents, and it was just so obvious to me. But even then, I think I continued to drink more. I'm not sure if I took a break after that, but fast forward to November, I don't even remember the date, it was like November 10th. I was day drinking with some friends, my boyfriend. There was like a chili cook-off downtown, so people were drinking during the day. It was a Sunday, and I was supposed to pick my son up at 5 o'clock on Sundays, and I figured I had time. I knew I would have time to sober up if I stopped drinking then. I think I had 3 beers, and it was like 12 o'clock. So 5 hours later, I might be okay to drive. But all of them were going to keep partying. They were all going to keep hanging out, and I didn't want to miss out on that. So I called my child's father, and I was honest. I said, I've had a few beers. I could stop now and sober up, but I kind of want to keep hanging with them. And I asked him, truth, I told him. And I said, can we just switch a night? Because him and I are really flexible like that. Like if he has something going on, we just switch nights. We're just, we didn't even go to court. Nothing's hardly in writing. We just kind of do our thing. And so he was like, yeah, that's fine, because there was a night he actually wanted off, that whatever. So he was totally fine with it. So I get off the phone, I drink a couple more beers, having a good time. And then the phone rings, and it's my son. At this point, he's like probably 5 years old. And he calls me crying, and my son is not a kid that cries unless he's very hurt or very emotionally upset. He's not the kid that just like tantrums and cries. He's actually a very happy-go-lucky kid. And he's crying, and he said, Mom, come pick me up. And I said, why? He said, you told me we were going to make Rice Krispie treats today. And I was like, oh, I completely had forgotten. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, like, we'll do it another day. And he kept crying. He was like, no, I want to do it now. And he was like, now that you know, why don't you just leave now and come get me? And I couldn't. I had been drinking at that point too much to get him. And that was one of those moments, like that sinking moment. I saw the cycle repeating itself, Like when I was little, well, I guess my parents' alcoholism got worse as I got older. But I used to get left places, I'd be like babysitting and I couldn't get in touch with my mom. She had blacked out, There were so many times. It just got so bad. There were times I would walk, I'd ask my dad, like, where's Mom? And he's like, oh, she passed out in the car. And he just left her there, So then I would go out to get her and see her like on the cement, like face smashed, like blood all over the place. And I'd have to like help her inside and like clean her up. And then the next morning, like put makeup on to cover up her face so she could go to work. Like I'm seeing this all play out. Like this is what's going to happen. Like my son's going to pick me off the driveway. I could see it all like clear as day. It was just I had already had a moment of clarity that I had basically the obsession and the allergy. I knew that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. But I always in the back of my head, not in the back of my head, in the front of my head, really. I thought, well, at least it doesn't impact my son, because most of my partying was done when he was with his dad. Not all of it, but most of it. But now, he's crying because I ditched him for alcohol. And that was just one of those moments where I said, I'm done. I said, I'm not drinking anymore. And it's not a break this time. I'm not drinking anymore, like, for good or for a long time, or, there's no span of time. I'm just done. And so a friend of mine actually came to the same realization. She called me, and she had issues. She was more of a blackout drinker, and she called me, and she's like, I got to stop. And I was like, I got to stop. And so we both did. And so we kind of leaned on each other at that point. And about 6 weeks later, my boyfriend and I ended up breaking up. And we were kind of on again, off again. But this was seemed like the real one. And I had been sober, so we tried it both ways, me drinking and me sober. It just wasn't going to work. But as soon as we broke up, I mentioned I felt like he was the stabilizing force, and all of a sudden he was gone. And I was actually afraid of what I was going to do. It's like now that I don't have this thing keeping me accountable, this stable thing, and it's been 6 weeks without drinking, but I don't know how to process a breakup. I don't know how to be alone. I don't know how to live without drinking. I didn't know how. And I didn't want to go back to drinking because I had already found out that I couldn't drink, I couldn't control it. And so I was just stuck in a corner, and in a true act of surrender, I called my mom, who at this point is 15 years sober in AA. And I always, anytime I talked to her, I downplayed my drinking, because I just didn't, mother-daughter stuff, So it was a true act of surrender. I called her, I'll never forget it. The sun was setting, and I was like standing outside my apartment, and I just knew she was the person to call. And she immediately started crying tears of joy, which was confusing to me. Your daughter's an alcoholic and you seem happy about it. Like, I don't understand, what's going on. And she just said, she was just so moved that I called her to talk to her about it. But also she said, I'll never forget, the hope in her voice. She was like, if I would have figured out what you're figuring out at 31, I can't even imagine what my life would be like. And she was like, I waited. She found out in her 50s when she was in the middle of a failing marriage and had massive amounts of, a ridiculous amount of credit card debt that she didn't know about. And just, her sobriety story is very different than mine. As far as all that, she had a lot to sort out. And so she was just so excited for me. And she gave me hope, and she said, well, why don't you just go to an AA meeting and see what you can learn? She said, you don't have to go and pick up a white chip and become a member. She was like, just go sit and, see what you can learn. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do that or not. I felt like it was something that was for her. I didn't know if it was something that was for me. I truly didn't even know if I was an alcoholic at that point. I wasn't sure if I belonged here. And so then, finally, Christmas Day, 2019, I was at work, and I just had this feeling. I was just kind of panicking because I knew that I was going up to Raleigh to see my siblings, and we always drank together. So I just was worried I wasn't going to be able to not drink. And so at 12, I left at lunch. I went to a noon meeting at the Wilder building, and so I just showed up, and I said, I'm Samantha. I'm here to learn. And then I shared, and I said exactly what was going on. I just had a breakup, I don't know, this is what's happening with me. I don't know if I belong here. And I just felt like the whole rest of the meeting, everybody was talking to me. And, they were talking to the newcomer. And I felt just so much love and understanding and acceptance, true connection with human beings, that wanted to help me. And that was the kind of thing I was looking for in the bars, and the party scene. I wanted to connect with people, and it really didn't work. It wasn't the same, A lot of times in the bars, I felt lonelier than I did by myself, drinking in a room full of people. But I walk in these rooms, and these perfect strangers are truly with all their heart rooting for me. They want me to be better. They want to see my life improve. They want me to succeed. And I just knew, and that's why it's so important, as members of AA to reach out to the newcomer. And, so many women were coming up to me, putting their numbers on my phone, and I had never experienced that before, and I didn't expect that, and it was such a beautiful thing. It made me want to keep coming back, even though I didn't know if I belonged. I wasn't sure if I did. Because my bottom didn't look like my parents' bottoms. My dad's bottom just kept getting deeper. He never found sobriety. And my parents divorced right after my mom got sober. But my mom's life just keeps getting better, She's just happy and free. So anyway, I go to a meeting on the 26th, and it was a women's meeting, and I shared about how my siblings at Christmas thought it was ridiculous that I went to AA. They were like, why would you go to AA? You're not an alcoholic, Samantha. You're always so hard on yourself. So they had me thinking that maybe I really wasn't, because at that point, I was brand new thinking about recovery, And so I shared that in the meeting, I don't know if I belong here. All my siblings don't think I have an issue. Even my ex-boyfriend, he would say, you're not an alcoholic. But I will say his mom is an alcoholic in AA, so I think he might have a little bit of a skewed definition himself. I hope he knows better now, I really do. But either way, I shared that in a meeting, the second meeting I went to, and this beautiful, of heart, soul, mind woman next to me shared about how her family also was not really accepting of her joining AA, and just people sharing stories like that. I felt understood, and I ended up asking that woman. I really just felt like I could look in her eyes and just peer into her beautiful soul. Like I just felt a connection with her, and I asked her if she would be my sponsor, and we ended up meeting, and that was the best decision of my life. I picked the right one. But yeah, we really connected, and I called her all the time. And she really helped me get through the steps. You know, step one was hard for me. It wasn't like I came in and I'm like, yes, I'm an alcoholic, here I am. You know, I really wasn't sure. I knew that, I knew that I wasn't able to drink without, I knew I didn't have control. But I didn't know if my life was unmanageable. You know, I was like, I still have a job, I wasn't really even alcohol dependent, as far as like my body. I didn't go through like withdrawal or anything when I stopped, I didn't lose any permanent, I didn't permanently lose important relationships. No one had like cut me off, and I didn't have any DUIs. I never like got in trouble. And now I can look back on all those things and add a yet to the end of all of them. I didn't have a DUI yet. Didn't lose my job yet. But at the time, I didn't know. I don't know if my life's unmanageable. I hadn't really lost anything. But what she helped me discover, and I discovered within myself as well, it's not manageable to hate yourself. It's not manageable for your son to call you crying, because you ditched him because you were drinking. It's not manageable to not know how to process emotions. Like, that's why I wound up, feeling so lost in a breakup, It's because it's not manageable to run from things. It's not manageable to want to hide and, hope nobody finds out about what you did. That none of that is manageable. That is not the way I want to live my life. So she was able to help me get through step 1, and then 2 and 3 was a challenge for me since I was agnostic, and that was part of the program that, I wasn't sure it was a fit for me because like all the God stuff, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. But I believed everybody that said just keep coming back. I believed everybody. There was so much hope. No one was just like, yeah, you're right, you don't belong here, you don't have that belief. Everybody was like, keep coming, And so I kept, being open and willing, honest, as they say in the book. And eventually, working with my sponsor and really searching myself, I was able to, find a higher power of my understanding. And it still, grows and transforms all the time, my understanding. So I don't know if anyone in this room is struggling with that aspect of the program, but just keep coming back and keep practicing, because even though I wasn't sure what I was praying to, I was praying. And, if some of you may have done the math, but December 19th is right before 2020. So I was still within my first 90 days of sobriety when everything started shutting down and meetings started shutting down. And even though I know that this particular meeting stayed open, in a safe way, I worked in long-term care facilities with older adults as a frontline worker. And so I definitely felt that I had to take every single precaution. I didn't leave the house except to go to work and come home. I didn't go to the grocery store. I didn't hang out with friends. I didn't see family for like most of that entire year. So that's a difficult, as many of you know in the room that were also, many of you in the room were sober in 2020 as well. Some of you early in sobriety. But it was definitely a difficult year. But I will say 2020 was good for me as far as practicing surrender, because so much was out of my control. It all was. I mean, I got moved around to different facilities within my company like 7 or 8 times in 2020. It was constant. As soon as I got comfortable somewhere, they'd be like, no, now we need you here. Now we need you here. And it would never stop changing. And it was scary, we didn't know that much about COVID, and I'm like dealing with people coughing on me, and I'm just like, am I gonna die? It was very scary. And my residents died, things was traumatic, it was all just so crazy to be processing all that while you're like, working on early sobriety. But I was able to do it, I was able to through prayer, whenever something would change, I would just like believe that things happen for a reason, or just believe that it's for the greater good, and I was always able to find that it was. And it's funny how when throughout my changes that I was going through, I may not see them, but I had coworkers that would literally say like, "How are you so calm?" People kept telling me that, like, "Oh, well, this department's getting shut down for good, and so I don't really know. They might put me there. I might be out of a job. I don't know." I was just kind of like, I just trusted that I didn't have control over it. So there's a peace in that, It's just like, well, let's see what happens, I'll do what I know to do if it comes to be a time where there's an action I have to take. But everything just ended up working itself out one way or another better than I could have thought it out. So it was actually, even though it was a challenging time, it was a good practice in surrender. And there was even a chunk of time, maybe 6 months, where I didn't go to a meeting. I was just connecting with my sponsor, and I was just focused on the next step ahead of me. That's how chaotic this year was. Kindergarten's closed. It's just like, oh, it was just like catastrophe after catastrophe. But finally, at one point, probably in the fall, it might have been September, I started to notice that my brain was starting to return to old thinking patterns, just like the wheels were spinning of me trying to think of a way to control this situation, and I noticed, I was like, I have not been going to meetings. I heard them talk about this in meetings, so I'm getting off course. And I could see it happening. I could see the serenity drifting away, and the old brain that was just like, oh, this has to be my way. I'm going to make this better work out the way that I want it to work out. And if only these people would act the way that I think they should act, then this would be fine. Those little things started coming back. So then, in September, I think it was September, I started coming back to meetings often, and it's been better since then. Of course, it's a thing we practice daily to surrender and pray, help others. But I think that, there's one other thing that's important that happened in 2020. So mid-2020, my dad gets sick, and he goes to the hospital, and we think he might have COVID, and I can't go be with him. I'm the riskiest child to go near anyone because I work in COVID-infested facilities. But when he gets to the hospital, they say, your skin is legitimately yellow. We're going to send you to the hospital. And he was diagnosed with liver cirrhosis, and he was given a 50% chance of living 3 months. So we're getting these calls, so basically, as I'm working on sobriety, alcoholism is killing my dad. And he had many bottoms. His story is very different than my mom's. He almost died so many times. I swear he has 9 lives. He's like a cat. He just keeps bouncing back. Terrible things will happen because of his drinking, and he bounces back. But he's one that will not do AA. He's not interested. But it was just a beautiful thing that I was able. I quarantined for a week and then went and spent a week with him at his house. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to do that sober, because if I hadn't been sober, I don't think I would have gone there. It would have been a week of me not being able to drink, and it would have been, I actually made an amends. When I made my amends to him, I included in there that I was sorry that I drank with him, when I knew he was an alcoholic, back when I was a drinker. I knew he had a problem, but I felt like we connected when we drank together, so I drank with him anyway. So I was so grateful that I was able to be there for him when he, as a sober person, and as a good example, as somebody that you can do it. I'm doing it at that point. I'm 31, 32, and I'm choosing a sober life where I'm not dying of alcoholism. So, and I did give him the Living Sober book. Because that's more practical, through the program, but it's more practical things about not drinking. At one point he was eating all this candy, and he was like, I guess when you have liver issues, you want sugar. And I was like, no. that's all the alcohol used to turn to sugar, so now you're having sugar cravings. So I was like a very helpful person to be there to talk him through it. And miraculously, he is still alive and working. He's doing better. His liver function seems to be improving at each visit. I don't know if he's sober or not. He says he is, but he always says he is. That doesn't mean that he is. I will say, though, it was kind of a beautiful moment. When I made amends to him, I wasn't expecting this at all, but he pulled a silver AA chip out of his pocket, and he said that whenever he feels the urge to drink, he kisses it and looks up at the sky. And then both of us started crying because I had no idea he did that. I didn't know that he kept a chip in his pocket. I didn't know he would gesture to the sky for any reason because he's an atheist. So it was a beautiful moment that I may have inspired him in a way. But so yeah, that's to say, how difficult 2020 was even if things are hard, you can still stick with it. I mean, even in disaster times, like I used to think this way, like my lowest low probably of my life, even though I was sober, was December of 2020, because I went through a heartbreak, which I'll say there's a reason they don't suggest you date in the first year. I should have listened to my sponsor on that one. There's a reason. I get it now. You don't have to learn all the mistakes, by doing them. But either way, shortly after that, I got COVID, and I was very sick. I ended up in the hospital at one point, and I was by myself and couldn't take care of myself, and nobody could take care of me. I literally was crawling around my apartment because I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. So it was really a traumatic, terrible time. But I remember thinking, I think my mom, at one point I was talking to her, and she was just even though things are really bad, sobriety is important. I think she was concerned because it was a super, super low time in my life. And I just thought to myself, bringing back the monster metaphor, it's when I'm trying to breathe, upset about this and that, do I really want to invite that monster back in my life? Oh yeah, come control me again. Oh yeah, let's bring that monster back, Let's bring back the obsession and allergy. No. That's just very obviously not going to help anything. No matter how bad things get, because life's going to throw you difficult times, that will never, ever be a solution. It will never help. It's just going to make everything worse. So I'm super grateful that I have such an amazing sponsor, and I'm, super grateful that I was able to stick with it. And I'm grateful for all of you, and I love all of you. And I'm excited to say that on Monday, the first person approached me and asked me to be their sponsor. So I'm going to start sponsoring, and I'm so excited about that. So it's a new chapter. But I appreciate you all listening. I hope at least one of you heard something that you needed to hear, and something that'll keep you coming back. So thank you all.